There are moments in life that change everything. When you look back, you realize it all started so ordinarily, but that ordinariness never stays the same. My story began just like that. My late husband Daniel had been gone for 2 years. Silence had settled over the house like a heavy blanket, and for those 2 years I had been trying to piece together the missing parts of my life. But I hadn't noticed how much Noah had grown. Or maybe I didn't want to notice. We were spending an ordinary evening in the living room, watching a movie. It was action-packed with bits of romance here and there. Noah was sprawled on the couch beside me, his arms casually stretched out, looking entirely at ease. For the first time I saw him differently. His shoulders broader, his jaw more defined. He wasn't a boy anymore, he was a man. I quickly pushed that thought out of my head. He's just Noah, I reminded myself. But that night, I had no idea how quickly those reminders would become meaningless. As the movie played on, the scenes grew more intense. Noah shifted slightly, resting his arm on the back of the couch, edging closer to me. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but he hesitated. For a moment our eyes met. In his gaze I saw something deeper, something that sent a strange unease through me. I tried to brush it off, to normalize the moment. It's nothing, just a movie, just a misunderstanding, I told myself. But my feelings, they weren't lying to me. During one of the romantic scenes, I felt his breath against my cheek. Without even realizing it, he had moved closer. His hand on the couch was so near to my shoulder that I couldn't tell if he was about to touch me or not. Inside, I was a mess. Being this close to him made me uncomfortable, yet strangely, it also sent a thrill through me. That feeling terrified me, but everything was happening so fast I couldn't even keep up with my own thoughts. "Sophia," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "I want to tell you something." I turned to him, my heart racing. "Yes, Noah?" I asked, but my voice was shaking. I want to thank you for everything," he said. "After Dad died, you've always been there for me. You didn't have to, but you did, and because of you, I never felt alone in this house. That's because of you." His words hit me hard, but the intensity of the moment left me feeling even more vulnerable. "Of course, Noah," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm glad you're here." But he didn't take his eyes off me. "Me too," he said slowly, his voice sounding deeper. "Seeing you here, it makes me feel at ease." The air between us grew heavy all of a sudden. He must have felt it too, because he pulled his hand back slightly, but his eyes never left mine. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. My heart was pounding like crazy, and my thoughts were all over the place. I tried to maintain the distance between us, but a spark had already ignited in my mind. He wasn't a boy anymore. That truth hit me, and it was a truth that would change everything. That night, Noah's approach toward me was different, warmer, more emotional. For years, I had been like a mother figure to him, but the Noah sitting next to me that night was no longer a little boy. At 19, he was tall, broad-shouldered, and undeniably handsome. But he was still my stepson, wasn't he? And that thought was what I clung to as I tried to suppress the confusing feelings stirring inside me, but I couldn't have known that it wouldn't stop there. When Noah looked at me that night, The depth in his eyes left me completely defenseless. As I wondered why he was being so emotional and warm that evening, I didn't realize just how close we were to something happening. That night would mark the beginning of something that would change the course of my life entirely. A few days had passed since that evening, and Noah was acting different than usual. At breakfast, he talked more, and his eyes barely left me. He had started helping around the house in ways he had never done before. "Sophia, let me help you," he said one morning when he saw me sweeping the floor. Without waiting for a response, he took the broom right out of my hands and started sweeping himself. I looked at him in shock. He had never done anything like this before. "I know you handle everything in this house by yourself," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "You're just one person. Someone needs to help you here." His words both surprised and moved me in ways I didn't expect. "Thank you, Noah," I said, trying to steady the slight tremble in my voice. But inside, a warm wave spread through me. The way he had so plainly acknowledged my loneliness struck a deep chord. Later that day, while I was cooking in the kitchen, I felt Noah's eyes on me. He was standing behind me, leaning against the counter, just watching. But these weren't the kind of looks I was used to. His eyes wandered over my body, my hips, my back, my hair. At first, I thought I was imagining it. "No, Sophia, you're overreacting," I told myself. But I could feel the intensity of his gaze. I did my best to act normal, but deep down, I couldn't deny the slight thrill I was feeling. To be honest, I liked it. It had been so long since I'd felt someone's attention on me like that. When Noah left the kitchen, I couldn't help but go to the mirror. I looked at myself in the reflection. Even in my 40s, I was still attractive. I had a slim waist, full hips, and a toned body thanks to regular exercise. My light brown, wavy hair fell gracefully over my shoulders, framing my face in a soft way. My breasts, well, they seemed to have forgotten my age. I hadn't looked at myself like this in the mirror in such a long time. In that moment, something stirred inside me. Something was changing. I could feel it. Noah's behavior became more obvious as the days went by. His eyes never left me anymore. Sometimes it was a casual touch, sometimes just a simple word. But I started noticing that he was pushing the boundaries between us. And maybe the worst part was, I found myself enjoying it. After what happened in the kitchen that day, as I lay in bed that night, one thought wouldn't leave my mind. Noah wasn't a boy anymore. He had grown into a mature, handsome man. But I never could have guessed how much that realization would excite me, and I knew that very soon there would be a moment where all of this would spiral into something impossible to untangle. One evening I came home after being out, and the sight that greeted me left me breathless. Candles flickered softly, casting a golden glow over the room. Flowers adorned the space, their delicate scent filling the air. A beautifully set table stood in the center, exuding elegance and care. More than anything, I was captivated by the birthday surprise Noah had prepared. At first, I couldn't believe it was for my birthday. This level of effort, this atmosphere, it felt like something meant for a lover. And when Noah stepped into the living room to greet me, I immediately understood why I had thought that. He wore a crisp white shirt and fitted black trousers. I had never seen him like this before, so put together, so charismatic. It was hard to take my eyes off him. "I wanted to make this day special for you," he said with a faint smile, then handed me a box. When I opened it and saw the dress inside, I looked at him in shock. It was a stunning, bold red dress with a soft texture, a deep open back, and a high slit. Excitement and hesitation bubbled up inside me. "You bought this for me?" I asked, surprised. "Of course, it's your birthday, and I wanted you to wear something special. I'm sure it'll look amazing on you," he said, his voice calm but his gaze intense. I took the dress and went to my room. Standing in front of the mirror, I let the soft red fabric brush against my skin. A sensation I hadn't felt in a long time stirred within me. As I slipped the dress on, I realized I hadn't worn anything that showcased my figure this beautifully in years. The slit revealed my long legs elegantly, while the curve of my waist and the smooth line of my back were perfectly complemented by the dress's design. I looked at my reflection. After a moment of silent observation, I smiled and whispered to myself, "This is crazy. I'm dressing up for Noah, but wow, I really do look stunning." I studied my reflection more closely, facing truths I had ignored for years. Yes, I was in my late 40s, but this dress made me feel like I was in my 20s again. My skin was still smooth, my light brown hair fell softly around my shoulders, framing my face with elegance, and inside I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in so long. Taking a deep breath, I left the room. As I walked down the stairs, Noah's eyes locked onto me, and he didn't look away. The way he stared at me made everything even more surreal. There was no mistaking the admiration in his gaze. Smiling, I said, "I owe this to you. The dress is incredible." But I quickly looked away, feeling self-conscious under Noah's intense gaze. "I was right," he said, his eyes still fixed on me. "You look absolutely stunning." Hearing such a direct compliment, I felt my heart race. I tried to brush it off. "You're exaggerating," I replied softly. Noah guided me to the table he had prepared. 2 wine glasses sat beside a bottle of deep red wine, positioned elegantly in the center. For a moment, I felt like I was in an entirely different scenario. This didn't feel like a birthday celebration. It felt like a romantic dinner. But I didn't say anything because the atmosphere had completely drawn me in. Noah opened the bottle and poured the wine into our glasses. Soft music played in the background, blending seamlessly with the warmth of the moment. As I took a sip, the rich taste left a lingering sweetness on my tongue. At first, our conversation revolved around the past, memories of Daniel, how life had changed, and how we had coped. But as the evening went on, I noticed Noah slowly steering the conversation to something much more personal. "Sophia," he said suddenly, his voice soft but serious, "how can a woman like you be alone? I just don't get it." I locked eyes with him, completely at a loss for words. "Noah, loneliness isn't always a choice. Life has a way of leaving you alone," I said, but his gaze held something deeper. "You don't have to stay alone," he added, lifting his glass to his lips. "A woman like you has needs, Sophia. And I'm here." The words caught in my throat. What he said touched me far deeper than I was prepared for. I raised my glass and took another sip, but my eyes stayed on Noah. This birthday had stopped being just a celebration. it was turning into something completely different. When Noah set his wine glass down, he never took his eyes off me. "Sophia, you look absolutely incredible. I wanted this night to be special for you because you deserve it," he said, his voice low but firm. I gave a shy smile, twirling my glass in my hand. "That's really sweet of you to say, Noah, but sometimes I wonder why you're putting in so much effort," I said. Noah raised an eyebrow slightly and replied, "Because you deserve it. You're not just a stepmom, Sophia. You're so much more than that." His tone carried a depth that both surprised and deeply moved me. For a moment, neither of us looked away. The silence between us only intensified the tension. My heart pounded, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything to break the moment. Noah slowly stood up from his seat, walked around the table, and came to my side. Resting his hand on the edge of the table, he leaned toward me. "Sophia, you don't deserve to share your life with someone who doesn't appreciate you. No one should overlook a woman like you," he said. "Noah," I began, but I had no idea what to say. The words were caught in my throat. Just as I was about to speak, Noah leaned in closer, his face mere inches from mine. "I can't hide how I feel about this," he whispered. Then his lips met mine. The kiss completely threw me off balance. I felt a passion, a warmth, a connection I hadn't felt in years. Noah's hand slid slowly to my waist, pulling me closer to him. What had started as a moment of shock quickly turned into something I couldn't help but respond to. Our lips stayed locked for what felt like an eternity, as though the world had come to a halt. But suddenly reality hit me. I slowly pulled away from Noah, completely out of breath. This isn't right," I said, my voice trembling. "Noah, I need to go to my room." That was all I could manage to say. Noah looked at me and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but I couldn't stop myself from feeling this," he said, his voice calm yet still carrying a fire within it. Without saying anything else, I stood up and hurried to my room. As soon as I entered, I shut the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. My heart was racing as I tried to piece together what had just happened. I sat down on the edge of my bed and looked at my reflection in the mirror. Even my own reflection seemed unable to shake off the weight of that moment. "How did this happen?" I whispered to myself. The whirlwind in my mind, mixed with the effects of the wine, slowly pulled me into my bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow, the emotions and weight of the evening overwhelmed me, and I drifted off to sleep. But the night wasn't over yet. Sometime later, I heard a faint noise. My eyes fluttered open, and I saw a shadow at the door. The door was slowly opening, and in the dim light, Noah's silhouette appeared. "Sophia," he whispered softly. His voice was low, but there was a certain determination to it. My heart started pounding again as he walked into the room. In the quiet of the night, I knew I shouldn't be here, but I couldn't help it, Noah said, closing the door behind him. In that moment, the look in his eyes told me that this night wasn't over. The determination in his gaze and the intensity of his voice completely consumed me. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. I knew I needed to say something, but the emotions I had buried for years suddenly bubbled to the surface as our eyes locked. I know I need to give you an answer, Noah, I said, my voice trembling but laced with raw honesty. I feel the same way, and I want you. The determination in Noah's eyes captivated me. The emotions I had hidden for so long were no longer something I could suppress. My heart raced, and I knew I had to act. Taking a deep breath, I steadied my shaking voice. I want this, Noah, I repeated, locking my gaze onto his. As those words left my lips, the mixture of surprise and happiness on his face gave me a surge of courage. A soft smile played on my lips, and I closed my eyes for a moment to gather myself. Please, before I lose my nerve, I whispered, my hands moving to my shoulders as I slowly slipped the thin straps of my dress down. The fabric slid off my body and pooled at my feet, leaving me standing there as Noah's breath caught in his throat. The admiration and desire in his eyes only fueled the excitement coursing through me. Without hesitation, Noah stepped closer and our lips met once again. His kiss was so full of passion, it felt as though the entire world had stopped. His hand slid around my waist, pulling me tightly against him as the kiss deepened. Finally, he gently guided me toward the bed. When we reached the edge, Noah's hands carefully lowered me onto the mattress as my eyes stayed locked on his. The weight of him over me made me surrender completely. Noah bent down, quickly pulled off his shirt and tossed it aside. Then, placing his knees on the bed, he leaned over me. The intensity of desire in his eyes only fueled the fire inside me even more. His fingers slowly traced down my cheek before finding my lips again. In that moment, the boundaries that had been built between us over the years completely vanished. I felt something I hadn't felt in over 2 years. I had fully surrendered. As Noah continued, I gripped the sheets tightly, closing my eyes. I let myself get lost in the tension and excitement coursing through my body. When I opened my eyes and looked at Noah, seeing his flushed face and broad shoulders, I couldn't resist. I reached my hands to his back, and in a fleeting moment of excitement, I dug my nails into his skin. Noah must have liked it because his heartbeat sped up even more. I placed my hand over his chest, feeling his racing heart, and in that moment, Noah couldn't hold back any longer. We surrendered to each other, and breathless Noah lay down beside me. That night, as we lay there talking about everything and nothing, I drifted off to sleep, happier than I had ever been. After that night, my life was going to take a completely different turn. I had just experienced a night unlike any other, and in that moment I realized this was only the beginning. Make sure to stay tuned for what happens next. This story doesn't end here. If you've made it this far, I know my story has deeply touched you. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss any of it. Don't forget to hit the follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story. How could I have known that moment would change my life completely? It was just an ordinary day until I walked into that room. When I noticed the door was slightly open, something inside me shifted. Within seconds, I could have turned back, ignored it. But I didn't, because in that moment, when I realized what I was looking at, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. And yes, I was the one at fault here, because I was the one who started it and the one who didn't stop it. Michael was at work, the house was quiet, but I heard faint noises coming from upstairs. Noah was in his room. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another moment of a young man lost in his own world. But maybe he'd like a coffee, a little conversation might be nice. As I walked up the stairs, I tried to figure out where the sounds were coming from. When I got closer to his room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I took a breath, about to call out to him, but then my eyes landed on Noah. He was sitting on his bed, his laptop on his lap, the bright screen casting a glow on his face. His hands were moving, and at first I thought he was just watching something exciting, maybe an action movie. But as I took one more step, changing my angle, I felt my blood drain from my face. That was the moment I realized exactly what Noah was doing. My eyes caught the reflection on the screen and a cold wave washed over me. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't wanted to see this. Noah scrambled, trying to compose himself, frantically lowering the volume on his laptop. But it was too late. The moment had already happened. When our eyes met, his face turned bright red, the shame in his expression undeniable. I'm sorry, he stammered, looking away. I felt frozen in place. The door? I started, but I had no idea what I was even trying to say. A strange warmth spread through me. I was embarrassed, yes, but my mind was also racing with thoughts I couldn't quite grasp. I quickly stepped out of the room, my heart pounding against my chest. Pressing my hands to my face, I tried to steady my breath. What the hell was that? I whispered to myself. What had I just done? Why had I been so careless? But was I the only one at fault here? Stop it, Anna, I told myself sternly. But the chaos inside me, it was triggered by more than just what I had seen. Noah was 24 now. He wasn't a kid anymore. But I was also 48, a woman who had experienced her fair share of shame in life. I had never been in a situation like this before, but I knew exactly what shame felt like. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart still racing. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to pull myself together. Then Noah appeared at the doorway. He adjusted the collar of his shirt, cleared his throat, and kept his eyes averted. Anna, I'm sorry. I thought I had closed the door, he said, his voice unsure but sincere. I quickly shook my head, looking away. No. Actually, I should be the one apologizing. I should have knocked before coming in, I said hurriedly, not really knowing what else to say. Silence. But this wasn't just any silence. We had lived in the same house for years, but this was the first time we had ever looked at each other like this. The first time there was this kind of tension between us. I should head downstairs and start preparing something for dinner, I said quickly, turning toward the stairs. My voice was trembling, but I was trying to hold it together. The air in the house felt different after that moment, heavier somehow. As I moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring the pot, I could still feel the remnants of what had just happened lingering in my chest. I told myself to push it away, to forget, but my mind wouldn't let it go. Noah didn't come downstairs right away, and when he finally did, he avoided my eyes, his expression unreadable. I forced a smile, acting like everything was normal, but we both knew it wasn't. The meal was quiet, too quiet. The usual chatter, the casual banter, it was missing. Noah was hesitant, barely touching his food, and I could hardly focus on eating at all. It wasn't just awkwardness, it was something else, something neither of us wanted to acknowledge. After dinner, Noah excused himself, mumbling something about needing to finish a project. I nodded, pretending not to notice how quickly he disappeared upstairs. The moment he was gone, I let out a long breath, pressing my fingers against my temples.